The stars shone above a quiet alien world where people whispered about a tiny princess who never smiled, never spoke, and never bonded with anyone no matter how many kings, warriors, or princes came to her world. She always said no or simply turned away. Her people believed she was cold, empty, or cursed, but no one really knew why she refused to bond. It was said her soul was locked in ice. Far away across galaxies, a human man named Leon lived alone. He had seen many worlds, fought many battles, and carried scars both inside and outside. One day he heard about the alien princess, not from the news, not from any official channel, but from a quiet traveler in a broken-down space station who whispered that the princess was waiting for someone. But she did not know who. Leon did not laugh. He did not roll his eyes. He simply stood up and booked a transport to the alien planet. No one knew his real reason, not even him. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe something deeper, but his heart felt pulled toward the story. When Leon arrived, he did not bow or bring gifts like others. He wore a worn jacket, carried no weapon, and looked around the palace with calm eyes. The guards laughed, the nobles sneered. The princess did not look at him. She sat on a tall throne made of crystal, her face as still as stone, her silver hair flowing like moonlight. Leon asked why he came. He said nothing for a moment, then replied softly, "I heard someone needed to be found." That was all he said. The high priest shook his head. Another fool. They all thought another failure ready to be thrown out. But the princess did something no one expected. She raised her hand just a little and said, "Let him stay." Everyone went silent. The air seemed to freeze. A human allowed to stay near the princess. It had never happened before. Leon was given a small room near the gardens not far from her chambers. Every evening he walked through the garden, not to find her but to feel the wind, to listen to the birds, to watch the twin moons rise. One night, the princess stood on her balcony and watched him. She said nothing as usual, but her eyes stayed on him longer than they ever had on anyone. Leon felt her gaze, but he did not turn. He kept looking at the stars, and for a moment he whispered a song from Earth, soft and sad, a tune filled with loss and hope. The princess listened, and something stirred inside her chest. It was not pain, not joy, not fear, something else, something she had not felt since childhood. That night, for the first time in her life, she dreamed. In the dream, she stood in a garden full of white flowers. The sky above was red and gold, and a shadow stood at the edge, not threatening, not loud, just present. When she stepped forward, the shadow held out a hand. She reached for it, but just before touching it, she woke up. She sat up in bed, her breathing fast, her hand trembling. Dreams were rare among her people, and this one felt real too. Real. The next morning, she summoned the council. They expected her to speak of politics, war, trade, but instead, she said, "Bring the human to the whole." Leon stood before her calm and quiet again. Not bowing, not trembling. He looked at her not with fear or desire, but with knowing eyes like he had seen her before. "Why are you here?" she asked again. "To find what is missing," he answered, and he looked not at her crown, not at her robes, but at her eyes. Room was filled with silence again. The elders shifted uncomfortably. The guards glanced at each other. The princess lowered her eyes for just a second, then said, "He will face the trial of worth." Gasps echoed through the chamber. The trial was ancient, dangerous, designed to test spirit, not strength. Most who entered never returned. Leon nodded slowly. He asked no questions. He only said, "When?" "Tomorrow morning," she replied. That night, she watched him from her balcony again. He sat in the garden singing that same song, soft and broken and full of meaning. She did not understand the words, but her heart understood the feeling. She touched the side of her neck where the soul crystal lay hidden. It felt warm, not cold, for the first time in years. She whispered to herself, "Why him?" And for the first time in her long, silent life, a single tear rolled down her cheek, canned far below. Without looking up, Leon smiled like he already knew. The morning came with a sky painted in soft violet and gold as twin suns rose behind the tall mountain peaks. The people of the Crystal City gathered around the sacred arena, a place where many had fallen. And only a few had returned alive. The trial of worth was not made for entertainment. It was created to test the soul. Leon stood at the entrance of the arena, dressed in simple clothes, his face calm, his heart steady. He looked around and saw sharp towers, glowing symbols, and a single gate that led into darkness. The elder priest stepped forward and raised a glowing staff. His voice echoed through the air. This trial is not for strength or speed. It is for truth within the heart. If the human fails, he will not return. The crowd murmured. The princess watched from above, her face unreadable, but her eyes fixed on the human as he gave one small nod and stepped forward into the shadows. The gate closed behind him, the light vanished, and silence fell inside the trial. The air was heavy, the walls breathed like a living beast. A voice spoke, aloud, but close inside his mind. Show me who you are. Leon took a breath and walked down a narrow path. Suddenly the ground shifted and turned into a field of fire ahead. He saw his childhood home burning, his mother calling out to him from the flames. He froze for a moment, then walked through the fire without a scream, without panic. The flames were not real, but the pain in his heart was. The fire vanished, and he stood in a cold forest. Snow fell without sound. His hands turned red from frost ahead. He saw a girl crying alone. He knew her from his past, someone he had failed to save. He walked to her, knelt down, and said, I am sorry. Her eyes looked at him filled with sadness. Then she faded into the snow again. The world shifted now. He stood before a mirror. His reflection did not move. It stared at him with cold eyes and spoke. You are weak. You are alone. You do not belong here. Leon looked at the reflection and whispered, I know, but I still walk forward. And the mirror shattered. Path continued. This time a beast blocked the way, tall like a mountain, eyes glowing like suns. It roared, and the ground shook. Others would have fought or turned away, but Leon simply stepped closer and reached out his hand. The beast sniffed him, then bowed, and vanished outside the arena. The crowd waited in silence. The elder priest checked the time. The princess never moved. Her eyes never left the gate. Suddenly, the sky above the arena cracked with a beam of white light. The gate opened, and Leon walked out slowly, his face covered in ash, his clothes torn, but his eyes still calm. He did not raise his hands. He did not shout. He simply looked up at the princess. The elder priest stepped forward and lowered his head. The trial accepts him. The human has passed. Gasps filled the air. The nobles whispered in disbelief. No outsider had ever passed the trial. Some thought it was a trick. Others stared in silence. The princess stood and walked down from her throne. The crowd parted as she moved closer to him. Her steps soft but sure. She stopped only inches away from Leon and looked into his eyes. You faced your own soul and returned, not with pride, but with peace, she said. Softly, her voice low, but clear. Leon did not speak. He just nodded once. Come with me, she said together. They walked past the stunned guards, past the elders, past the nobles, who bowed their heads low. For the first time in history, the princess had chosen to walk beside someone not from her world. They entered the garden where stars always glowed, even during the day. She stopped near the crystal pond and turned to him. Do you know why I chose you to take the trial? She asked. Leon looked at the water, and then at her. I think because I never asked for anything. She gave a small nod, and for a second something flickered in her eyes. Not power, not command, but something softer. I felt your voice before I ever heard it, she said, and last night I dreamed. Again, this time I saw the stars fall into this garden, and you were there holding one in your hand. He looked down at his palm and closed it gently. Then I will keep it safe, he said. The soul crystal on her neck glowed once more, and this time it stayed warm. Far above, the stars shifted, as if watching, and the wind carried the sound of a song without words. The princess turned to leave, but paused for a moment and said, You are no longer just a visitor. Herein, Leon followed her into the palace, knowing this was only the beginning. The palace walls held stories no one dared to speak, and yet that night, something new moved within them, something ancient, something forbidden. The princess stood alone in her chamber, looking at the glowing crystal near her neck. Her fingers touched it gently, and she felt it pulsing like a heartbeat. Not her own, but somehow connected. She remembered the human's voice during the trial, his words still echoed softly in her ears, and the way he walked through fire without screaming, and the way he looked into fear and did not run made her feel something she had never known before, something warm and heavy and alive. The law of her people was clear. Bonding outside the royal circle was betrayal. Bonding with a human was madness, yet here she was unable to look away from the thought of him. She stepped onto her balcony, the night wind brushing against her silver hair, and below him she saw him walking in the moon garden again, as if he knew she was watching again, but never looking up, never seeking her gaze. She turned away, her chest tight, her mind restless. Then suddenly she left her room without a word, her steps silent, her robe trailing behind her like a whisper. She reached the garden just as he sat near the fountain, watching the stars without fear, without armor, just a man breathing. He turned as she approached, but said nothing. She sat beside him, not close, not far, her eyes on the same stars he watched. Tell me about your world, she said, her voice quiet. Leon looked at the sky, then smiled. It is loud and full of smoke, but sometimes it smells like rain, and music flows even in the streets, and people laugh even when they are broken, and they always hope, even when nothing makes sense. She closed her eyes for a moment and said, "We do not laugh much." He nodded. I noticed they sat in silence, a silence not empty but full, and her hand moved closer to his without touching. She looked at him again, her face calm, but her voice shaking a little. "Why do you not ask for anything?" "From me, everyone always wants something," Leon answered slowly. "Maybe because I have already been given too much in this short time." Wind moved gently, the trees swayed as if listening, and the soul crystal on her neck glowed faintly again. She placed her hand over it, trying to hide it. "Two are not allowed to be here," she said softly. "Then I will leave if you wish," Leon replied, but she did not tell him to go. Instead, she asked, "Do you believe two souls can speak without words?" "Yes," he said. "I do." She stood then and turned toward the path back to the palace, her steps slow, her heart faster than ever before. When she reached the door, she paused, then said, "If I call you again, will you come always?" He replied. She nodded once and vanished into the hall. Next morning, the palace buzzed with voices. The council had sensed the change. The elders gathered in shadows, their faces pale with fear. "She has opened the bond," they whispered. "It cannot be allowed." They said in the sacred tower, the high priest activated the seal reader and saw the glow in her soul crystal. The pattern was forming, the bond was real and growing fast. He left at once, stormed into the council hall, and shouted, "The forbidden has begun. She must be stopped." But none dared go near her chamber. Not yet, not while she remained calm and silent. Later that evening, the princess stood again on her balcony, her hand resting on the railing, her mind full of questions. She thought about her duty, about the laws, about her people. But above all, she thought about the garden, the quiet song in his voice, the steady peace in his eyes far below. Leon sat once more, this time not looking at the stars, but waiting. She watched him for a long moment, then whispered something ancient, something sacred, a word her people had forgotten long ago. In that moment, the bond deepened, though no one touched, no one spoke, and no one moved. The stars above shifted ever so slightly, as if blessing the moment. The soul crystal pulsed once more and did not stop in the council hall. Torches flared, scrolls were opened, laws were read out loud, punishment was prepared, exile or death, they said. But the princess was not afraid anymore. In her chamber that night, she touched the mirror and whispered to her reflection, What if love is not weakness, but the beginning of strength outside in the garden? Leon closed his eyes and smiled as if he had heard her soul call to him in silence. Bond was no longer a secret. It had begun, and no force in the galaxy could stop it now. Sky over the Crystal City turned a strange color that morning, a pale gold mixed with deep storm blue. As if the heavens knew something was changing, something that could not be reversed inside the council chamber. Elders gathered in silence, the heavy scrolls of law unrolled on the long glass table. The high priest stood at the center, his face pale, his fingers trembling slightly. The soul crystal has responded. He said in a voice sharper than usual, the forbidden bond is forming with the human, and if we do not stop it now, it will be too late. Gasps spread across the chamber. Some whispered fearfully, others clenched their fists. No one had expected the cold, silent princess to ever bond, and now she had chosen an outsider, not just an outsider but a human. We must act. One elder said she must be confined. Another said the bond must be broken. The human must be removed. A third added, his voice rising with each word. But none of them dared approach her chamber. None of them had seen what she had become since the bond had begun to awaken. The power flowing through her was not wild or dangerous, but it was strong, stronger than any of them had imagined. Meanwhile, Leon stood outside in the garden again, the same garden where it had all started. Birds flew quietly above him, and the fountain whispered its endless story. He knew something was coming. He could feel the shift in the air, like before a storm. He did not move, he only waited. The princess sat in her private hall, wearing a robe of moonlight. Threads her face calm. Her eyes steadied. The soul crystal near her neck now glowed without pause, warm and alive. A guard entered, slowly bowing. Loth up. Council has sent for you. They demand your presence, he said. She stood without a word and followed the guard through the silent halls, each step echoing like a drumbeat through history. She entered the council chamber and looked at the faces of those who had once ruled her childhood. The high priest stepped forward. You have broken the sacred code. You have begun a bond with an outsider. This cannot be allowed. It will destroy the balance of our people. She looked at him, then at the others, and spoke in a voice that held both fire and ice. The balance you speak of is built on fear. I choose something different. I choose truth. He is not one of us, the priest shouted. He cannot understand our ways. He cannot share our souls. Then perhaps our soul needs to grow, she replied softly. The room filled with whispers. The laws say the bond must be approved by the council, another elder said. Then change the law. She answered, we cannot. It is older than us. It is sacred, the priest insisted. And what is sacred if it kills what is alive? She said. They council fell silent. None dared respond. Suddenly, a younger priest stepped forward, his voice unsure but firm. She is right. The law was made in fear and silence. But now there is something else, something we have never seen before. Elder priest turned on him with rage. Silence. He roared. The bond must be broken before it completes, or we will all suffer. The princess looked at him and said, if he dies, so do I. Gasps filled the chamber again. The elders froze. The air grew heavy. The walls seemed to pull closer. You would throw away your crown, your people, your future for him? The high priest asked. No, she said. I would give them all something they have never had hope with. That she turned and walked out of the chamber, not waiting for permission, not caring for approval. The guards outside watched her pass, but none moved to stop. Hirsch reached the garden and found Leon waiting, as if he already knew she would come. His eyes were calm, his presence warm. They will try to take you, she said. Then I will stay still, he answered. She sat beside him and whispered the old song from his world, the one she had heard in her dreams, the one that made her soul respond. Leon reached out his hand, and without fear, she placed hers in his. Pulse of light spread from their touch, soft but powerful. The crystal on her neck shone brighter than ever before, and the garden bloomed with flowers that had not been seen in 1,000 years. Far above, in the stars, something shifted again. A signal perhaps, or a blessing, or maybe just the universe watching. The council stood in silence, watching the glow from the tower, unable to speak, unable to stop what had already begun. The forbidden bond had passed the point of no return, and in that moment, a new story began. The garden stayed quiet, as if time had slowed down around the two figures sitting near the old fountain. The soft glow from her soul crystal danced across the water, while gentle winds brushed through silver leaves. Leon sat still with her hand in his fingers, warm and steady. Her eyes held his gaze like they had found a language without sound for the first time in her life. The princess felt something shift deep inside her. Not fear, not power, not pride, but something new, something soft, something strong. She could feel his presence, not just beside her, but inside her, like a calm voice guiding her through a storm. She closed her eyes and saw flashes of earth, his childhood, his memories, his pain. Line felt it to her loneliness, her silence, her dreams buried under duty and law, and cold stares from those who raised her. He saw a child who had no one to sing to her, no one to hold her when she cried. He understood. And he did not need to speak. She could feel it in the way he breathed. Bond was no longer forming. It was complete. Far above, the city's stars gathered into strange shapes. Watchers from other worlds noticed the shift in energy readings. They could not explain the light that now pulsed from the palace heart. The power was not like anything in their records. Inside the council chamber, the elders tried to speak, but words failed. One of them collapsed to his knees, not from pain, but from something else. The light had reached even there, and it was opening something they had locked away long ago. We cannot fight it, one elder whispered. High priest stared at the floor, his hands shaking. The bond is pure, he said, not forced, not broken, not unworthy. It is alive, back. In the garden, the princess looked at Leon, her lips parted, but her voice caught in her throat. She had never said the word before, but now it formed without fear. Thank you, she said, softly. Leon smiled, not with pride, but with peace, as if he had been waiting his whole life for that word to be said. Like that, she stood slowly, pulling him up, with her fingers still locked in his. We must speak to the stars, she said. We must let them know love has returned to our world. We followed her as they walked through the halls, side by side. The guards bowed. Without thinking, the staff stepped aside. Some wept quietly as they passed. They entered the sacred tower, where only royals were allowed. A place of old machines and crystal maps that showed the movement of the galaxy. The walls shimmered with hidden knowledge. The princess walked to the center and placed her hand on the control stone. Leon stepped beside her and placed his hand to the system, reacted. Immediately, glowing symbols lit up above their heads, and a beam of light shot into the sky. Like a silent song being played across space. In a ship orbiting above, alien researchers stood stunned by the signal. She is calling out, one of them said. Two, who asked another to everything. The first answered back. On the planet, the message carried not just data, but emotion. Not just light, but memory, and in every world that received it, something stirred. A distant moon, a child with no family, felt warmth for the first time in months. In a station filled with warriors, a fight stopped mid-air. As they turned to look at the stars on a dying world, where nothing grew, a single flower opened under a strange sky. The bond between the princess and Leon was not just personal, it was cosmic. In the palace, the crystal on her neck began to change. It grew brighter and then melted into her skin, no longer an object, but now a part of her soul. She looked at Leon and said, the bond is complete. What does that mean? He asked. Softly, she reached up and touched his face and whispered, now I can feel everything. You feel and you can feel everything I hide. They stood there for a long time in silence. But it was not empty. The walls breathed with them. The stars blinked above them. The ground hummed under their feet. The council chamber, the elders burned. The elders burned the old scrolls without words. They knew the age of silence had ended. The age of truth had begun that night. No one in the city slept. Not because of fear, but because of something strange and beautiful in the air. A feeling none could name, but all could. Sensei Princess, who once felt nothing, had touched the soul of a human, and in doing so had awakened her world. Stars above the crystal palace burned brighter than ever before, their light dancing through the sacred tower where the bond had awakened. Something more than love, more than connection, the princess sat alone near the ancient mirror in her private chamber, her hand resting on her heart. Where the soul crystal had once glowed, now its light pulsed from within her chest, quiet and steady. Like a second heartbeat, her fingers trembled not from fear, but from the weight of something she had never known until now, memory ancient and locked away. Slowly opening behind her closed eyes, Leon stood outside the chamber, his back against the cold. While listening to the quiet air, he could feel it. Something was wrong, not danger, not anger, but something deep and hidden, something that had been waiting far longer than he had. Been alive inside, her mind images swirled, a hidden chamber, a voice whispering, promises, a golden thread running through generations. Always broken, always silenced. She saw herself as a child walking through the halls of knowledge, asking about the first queen who vanished long ago. No one had answered, they only told her to focus on her role, her future, her silence now. Those images returned not just as dreams, but as truth. She saw the truth of her own bloodline, the lie that was planted to keep her soul untouched, the secret bond made by her ancestor with another outsider. Not a human, but something close, a being of light. The council feared that bond, feared the power it gave, so they erased it. They buried it under law and silence, and forced every daughter of the line to stay untouched, unbonded, alone. But the bond was never meant to be destroyed, only delayed, only hidden until one would come again who would unlock it. Not with power, not with fear, but with kindness. She stood slowly, her breath shaking, and stepped toward the ancient mirror. It shimmered not with reflection, but with memory. Her fingers touched the cold surface, and it turned warm. She saw the first queen again, her eyes filled with the same light that now lived in her own. Queen spoke no words, but the message was clear. You are the one. Leon felt something pull inside him and stepped forward, entering the chamber. Without a sound, the princess turned her eyes, glowing faintly with a light he had never seen before. Remember, she said. He walked closer, his voice soft. What do you remember? The truth, she said. The bond is older than us, older than this world, and it is inside me now. She reached for his hand, and the moment they touched, the room changed. The walls faded, the stars above could be seen through the ceiling, and a voice, not hers, not his, but something ancient, spoke through them. Both the bond was broken by fear, but it is healed by love. They stood in silence, the stars, watching the world holding its breath. Outside the palace, the sky shifted, a ring of light spread across the heavens, touching every tower, every tree, every soul. The council chamber, the elders dropped their scrolls. The high priest stepped back, his voice lost in wonder. It was never a curse, he whispered. It was a shield. Princess looked at Leon, her voice steady but soft. I was never empty. I was never broken. I was made to carry this, waiting for the one who would not take. But Gavandu Chameleon smiled, not because he was proud, but because he understood, because she had been alone too long, because she had waited too long, because now she would never have to wait again. They walked together to the star platform where the bond had been sealed. Now the ground itself responded to their steps, the symbols glowing brighter with every breath. They 2K storm began to form above, not of rain or fire, but of light, voices from beyond this world, joining the call. The bond had awakened, something not just in them, but in the galaxy itself. Ancient systems in the tower activated for the first time in centuries. Records of the first queen, her journey, her love, her warning, all came to life across crystal walls and glowing stones. The people of the city gathered below, looking up in silence as the tower sang not in words but in memory. They saw the truth, the hidden past, the reason their princess had always been silent. They wept not from shame, but from release from the weight of a lie too long carried. The princess looked out over her people, and for the first time she felt them. Not as distant, not as duty, but as part of her soul. She turned to Leon and said the secret was never meant to be kept forever. It was meant to be broken by someone brave enough to feel, and he answered, "Then we break it together." Their hands met again, and the bond pulsed once more. This time, not in silence, but in harmony. The stars above echoed their light, the ground beneath them hummed with life. The secret was no longer within her. It had become part of everything. The sky above the crystal city turned golden, as if the stars themselves had opened their eyes watching what was about to happen. The sacred tower shimmered under the light of the twin moons, while the people stood in silence, their eyes on the royal platform where the princess and Leon stood hand in hand. Something old was waking, something long hidden, not just inside her, not just inside him, but deep inside the planet itself. Oh. The ground trembled slightly, not with fear, but with anticipation, as if it too remembered what had been forgotten. The princess looked up, her eyes glowing with soft fire, her voice calm but strong. Today, the soul of this world will awaken, not through law, not through power, but through truth and love. Leon stood beside her without speaking. His presence was enough. His silence was strength. Far below, the council gathered in robes, no longer white but dim with dust. The high priest stepped forward with scrolls in hand, but he did not speak. He simply knelt, placing the ancient laws at her feet, his head bowed. The time of silence has ended, he whispered. She nodded, not in pride, but in peace, then raised her hand to the sky. The crystal platform beneath her began to rise, glowing with energy, each symbol lighting up one by one, reaching toward the stars. A beam of light shot into the sky, not thin, not narrow, but wide, like a river of memory. The air filled with colors that had no name, shapes that danced like voices from forgotten times. So the galaxy ships paused. Space stations turned, planets rotated slightly toward the signal. It was not a weapon, not a cry for help. It was something pure, a call from a soul finally free inside. The tower, the energy wrapped around the princess, her body surrounded by soft light. Her feet lifted gently above the ground, her hair flowing like starlight. Leon watched, not in fear, but in awe, the bond between them glowing across his chest. As well, he stepped forward, reaching for her hand, and the moment they touched, a wave of energy burst outward. The city lit up like never before. Towers that had been dark for ages came alive. Trees bloomed in seconds. Fountains sang instead of splashing, and the people felt it inside their hearts. A warmth, a memory, a story they did not know they had forgotten. The princess opened her eyes, now brighter than suns. Her voice now echoed through every corner of the world, not loud, not harsh, but clear and full of feeling. We are never meant to live in silence, never meant to fear love, never meant to forget who we are. She turned to Leon and placed her other hand on his chest, her soul touching his completely. Are my choice, not by law, not by need, but by truth, and the truth will never fade. Leon smiled and closed his eyes, letting the light pass through him, feeling her emotions, her memories, her hopes, her pain, all of it. Beam above them twisted into the shape of a tree, its roots deep in the sky, its branches reaching through the stars. A symbol of what had been born again in the council hall. The elders stood with tears in their eyes, not from sorrow, but from something far more powerful, understanding. One of them stepped outside, raised his arms, and shouted to the people, "Today is not the end, it is the beginning." Voices rose in the streets, not in confusion, but in joy. The silence that had ruled their lives for generations was broken, and in its place was song, not made of music, but of feeling. The bond had done more than unite two souls. It had opened a door between the past and the future, between fear and love, between silence and truth. Back On the platform, the princess slowly descended, her feet touching the glowing floor once more. The energy around her faded into her skin, now part of her forever. She looked at Leon. Her voice soft but steady. "You gave me more than love, you gave me myself," he replied without hesitation, "and you gave me a reason to believe." Again they walked down together hand in hand as the people stepped aside, bowing not out of duty, but out of gratitude. The guards placed their weapons on the ground, flowers bloomed wherever they stepped. Children reached out to touch their robes, as if touching light itself that night. The city did not sleep. Lights floated through the air, soft colors painted the sky, and stories were told by every fire, stories not of war or loss, but of the tiny princess who once refused to bond until one human touched her soul. And in every corner of the galaxy, the stars held their breath and smiled because the soul had awakened, and it would never sleep again.